Hey, welcome to another edition of the DRIPdrop Podcast. And this is the first ever on location podcast episode. I'm extremely excited because number one, we're in my hometown of Comac, Long Island, New York, at one of my favorite drip bars in the world. Dare I say the best location? I could say that, which is in Comac, New York. And I'm here with the one and only, one of the best general managers of not just a drip bar, but a person I've known for quite some time, Ryan Toulson. Ryan, how's it going?
It's going pretty good, Corey. I'm excited to be here.
Well, that's good, because what I want to talk about today and focus really on, it's specifically two things. Because very often we talk to owners and we do episodes on all of these different KPIs and we measure success based on how much money we're making, and all that's great. And you guys are doing really well. You guys have been open how long?
Since June 5th.
Yeah. So pretty young still, right?
Yeah.
What I want to focus on today is really two things. Number one, the amount of experience that you specifically bring. So we'll talk a little bit about your background.
Okay.
And how that relates to specifically selling memberships.
Okay.
We talk a lot about memberships. I think memberships are still relatively new in the IV drip world because the IV drip world is relatively new, even though we dominate here at the DRIPBaR.
Sure.
But those are the two things I want to focus on. So Ryan, talk to me a little bit about your career. Where'd you get started? I know you come from the same background I come from, which is fitness. There are a lot of pretty similar things that we do in fitness that we do in wellness. But where'd you get your start at?
I actually started off at New York Sports Club personal trainer in Oceanside.
How big was that club back in the day? And I remember being there with you, so I know it really well.
Yeah. So it was probably 8 trainers. I was one of the 8 trainers. Came in very fresh, young. I went to like a personal training technology school. So coming in, it was a little overwhelming at first, but started to get my feet under me pretty quickly.
And so what's the dynamic when you're that young and you're dealing with customers? Because, I always say personal trainers are great because essentially, right, it's a customer experience thing. Like if you have a poor personality, I always say like if you're a great trainer, you can have the best resume in the world and the most certifications, but if it's like talking to the wall when it's talking to you, you're never going to get clients. So what was it about those early years that you were learning to interact with customers?
Yeah, I was finding my cadence, basically. Really starting to get in tune and in touch with the client specifically, not try to like cookie cutter it. In my earlier career, it was always about how I could fit a program to the person as opposed to the person to a program. So learning that through the years was definitely a huge key to my success.
And back then, like with many trainers, like you do your free session with someone, and then what do you have to do? Bring them over to the table, and you got to try to sell them.
Yep. Yeah, that whole price presentation is scary.
Well, what were some of the bad memories of where like you're like, oh, I really don't want to do this, right? Because you're young, you're not experienced. No one goes to school to learn how to sell. We say that all the time.
Yep. Yeah. So big things for me was always like, I was always afraid to be told no, right? So I always like prejudged the sale or didn't assume the sale. So it was always like walking in like I was scared. Didn't want to pitch that $700 package or $1,000 package. So it was always like, all right, I'll pitch the free session and try to sell them on that, and then the programming and the lowest possible program I possibly could.
Yeah, no, I remember I again, similar background. And I think what I always say is that like I was afraid to pitch those packages because that money was a lot to me.
Right.
And I was thinking more along the lines of like, well, if it's expensive to me, it's surely expensive to them, right?
Yep.
Is that sort of similarly how you were thinking back then?
100%. I was like, I can't afford this, so how come back? So it was always about, I was undervaluing the program before I even got to it.
Yeah, that's the kiss of death.
Yes.
And again, that comes with experience. Totally get where you're coming from, right? But it's important that we point that out because you can't think with your own wallet. You're immediately devaluing what we do here.
Exactly.
And not only at the DRIPBaR, but back then at New York Sports Club and your personal training sessions specifically. What happened in that role? Did you move up in the company? Did you leave the company? What happened at that point?
Yeah, actually, I was on a fast track. In 6 months, I was actually promoted to the fitness manager of that location. So, and then
So that was your first experience managing a team.
Yeah.
What were some of the things you learned about that?
Created a dynamic team. I always try to, everyone always told you, replicate yourself. But as much as you wanted to identify somebody that was like me or like you, it was also try to find people that were opposite of me, because it's going to speak to different, demographics or different people throughout the industry. So.
Yeah, I think that's an important lesson, right? You're a rock star GM or a fitness manager for a reason. If it was that easy, everyone on your staff would be there, right? So I think it is important to understand not about it's about coaching others, right? And so you were the fitness manager there for how long?
About a year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and did you just find it the difference between you starting out as a trainer and being nervous to pitch packages? Like, what was it that gave you more confidence? Because I'm assuming you started to be really good or better at sales.
Yes, a lot better at sales. I would say probably my first month to 2 months was a little rocky, but then I started to find my stride. And not only did I find my own stride, but I was helping the trainers around and helping them, close packages or programs or giving them tips as a trainer before I even got promoted to actually helping them excel selling their own programs and packages.
What was that sales process like? Because I think it's pretty similar, and any boutique sort of business or even a big box gym like a New York Sports Club. In other words, like here at the DRIPbaR, we have nurses that the customer is going to interact with, and then at some point there's going to be that handoff back to the front desk, right?
Yep.
So you're the fitness manager. Trainers were doing free sessions,
Yep.
right? And then I'm sure at some point, because you're the expert, you're the OG,
Yep.
right? Like you're stepping in at that point and trying to close the deal. Is that sort of how it worked?
Yeah, generally that's how it worked. I mean, for the most part, it was I'd oversee the program, talk about the program before the person even came in. We try to get a little background. We did intake forms, kind of like what we do here as well. But it was more learning about the client, their specific goals before they even went out there. So as that trainer was working with the client, I could take the intake form or that PAR-Q and go over it and review it to see like what their specific goals are, areas of concern, and kind of just help now and manage that process afterwards.
So at that point, fitness manager, you were fast tracked. What happened? Where were you? Where was your career?
Well, with the transition with New York Sports Club, I took a little step back, went back to training, went back to exercise, focused back on myself, got a little bit of a nutrition certification. And then another opportunity opened up to kind of go back to fitness management at the same company, New York Sports Club at Long Beach, when they reopened. So, and then from there, it was area manager. So it was a dual role, 2 locations. Then I grand scale. I started working on a 4 location, and I got into learning and development for New York Sports Club.
Yeah,
so that's where we met.
Exactly. And so we talk about area manager. I know we'll get specific role is here and what the vision you here at the DRIPbaR, which is great. Area manager, a whole different ballgame, right? You're just managing more people, locations, right?
100%, totally different ballgame because now you have to have or identify someone who's almost as strong as you are in the building, but manage from a distance. Keep letting them do their thing, but also like now you keep on putting your fingerprint on each location individually.
Yeah, I think it's important, especially for people that have visions of multi-unit ownership, right? It's really you have to start with someone like you, right? And then that understands it and coaching people up, because very often we talk about coach up and coach out. They don't like to coach people out of their role, but like at some point, if they're not being held accountable, right, then we run into problems. Right. So let's fast forward a little bit to the dynamic here at the DRIPbaR.
Sure.
So talk a little bit about, for those that don't know about this location, how involved the owners? How many owners are there here of this location? Like, well, what is the ownership group like?
I mean, so number one, they're great. They're very
to say that
they're very involved. There's 4 owners, so it's definitely working with 4 different personalities too, and different visions of how the business should be run. But they all, want to achieve success. So for the most part, we have multiple meetings. We have weekly meetings. There's daily contacts that I have with individual owners as well. But it's about how we can continuously see growth and growth through not just one location, but multiple locations.
Yeah, and it's fair to say that you run the show, right? And it's fair to say they're absentee in the sense that like they're not working here. Right. They pop in and out, and you're probably like, thank God. And I know the ownership group very well, so thank God they took my advice and hired you. But I think that's important because they're entrusting someone with experience. And we talked a little bit about your experience.
Right.
And when we talk about experience, it's not just about your experience in sales and the ability to not be afraid to pitch someone a package, because quite frankly, you believe in it.
Right.
It's about how do you get others and how do you coach your staff, right? So you're the GM of this location. This ownership group I know has visions of opening up multiple locations here on Long Island. They're actually in talks on their next 2 locations. And so that's great, which means you're going to step into more of that area manager role, which you're quite comfortable with.
Yeah.
But talk to me a little bit about then when you're opening up this location, how do you go about putting together a staff? So, well, what is the staff makeup here at this particular store?
Yeah. So we have a couple per diem nurses. We have one lead nurse, so that's like my go-to, Alexis. She's the go-to person that I want to sit back and really like lean on her to kind of run the show when I'm not here. She's going to be that voice when the clients are sitting in the drip room that they're going to listen to. They're going to kind of confide in a little bit more than me. But then the front desk, that's a key role as well. Someone who's going to be personable, friendly, really connect to the clients when they come in and go. And then it's me kind of being that chameleon to do all of those things. Be able to assist Alexis in the back or at the front and making sure that the clients are understanding what is an IV drip, what is IV therapy. So that's one of the biggest questions we always get. How does this work?
And exactly. And how do you staff the hours for the people at the front desk? And then where do you come into play in that scenario?
Yeah, so generally we work full days for our front desk. I have 3 girls that usually work the front desk with me. And then I come in and I work usually full days, mostly 6 days a week. I'm just basically, again, I'm overseeing what they do on a regular basis. When we first get into the role, when we first started, it was a lot of hands-on training,
Sure.
lots of like conversations, building the team, meetings, so on and so forth. Now, as we've kind of been, open for 6 months now, it's been a little bit more step back, kind of listen, observe, making sure they're doing the right things, and then kind of just overseeing that process.
So yeah, that's an important key. Talk a little bit about early on the person running the store. In this case, it's you. When do you meet with your staff on a one-on-one basis? What kind of coaching advice do you give? What are some of the things that you want them to make sure they execute in a given day?
Yeah. So normally, I do that one-on-one meeting with the front desk, review the day, see what our setup.
What are some of the things you review in that day?
So we're going to review like what the client list looks like. So all of our current appointments. Then we're going to review what the additional people are doing outside of that. So meaning what our call lists look like, our text drives, our call lists, those types of things. So that's really what we review main part of the day. And then with the nurse, I want to go over, all right, so if the people are getting a power pack drip today, or they're getting a vitality drip today, let's review like why they're doing that. So now we can discuss how we can, build a program or do the initial steps and build from there.
And when you're working through that execution of what you need to do for the day, as days go on, if you're noticing a trend where things aren't getting done,
Yep.
How do you go about handling that? Is that a private conversation? How do you hold people accountable? I think a lot of owners ask me, I find it hard to hold my staff accountable because I like them, I'm with them.
Right. Yeah. So generally we'll do like a little step back, if we step into where, let's say, again, we weren't doing our call lists or we weren't doing our text threads. I'll definitely sit down and have a private conversation, like, all right, how did the day get away from us? Really dive into what happened that particular day. And if nothing really was going on, well, then it's a private conversation to be like, we got to understand that the growth of the business is key and reliant on this type of success. So,
and then which I love because you have to be consistent and you have to be accountable, right? So what happens in terms of the sales process and the workflow here specifically? So let's talk a little bit about, because we talked a lot about your experience and how you're very comfortable not only selling yourself, but obviously coaching up others on how to do that as well. We execute during the day on a certain amount of tasks. If they're failing at that, we're holding them accountable, all those key aspects, right? How many memberships have you sold?
Right now we're at 207.
Yeah, and you've only been open 5-6 months, right? And so one of the fastest to ever do that, which is phenomenal. And I want to focus on because there's an art to selling. It's easy to do it in fitness. It's difficult to do it in the IV drip business.
Big difference, big swing.
Big swing. Even though you've been successful, let's talk first about what was some of the lessons you learned about selling memberships here?
Sure.
And what did you kind of grow into in terms of like what's your niche now? Because your process in the beginning, I'm sure, changed
Oh, big time.
as you got feedback in real time and people are saying no and they're objecting and like you're like, wow, I used to do this in fitness,
Yep.
but how did that evolution happen?
Yeah, so in the very beginning, I noticed very quickly the response rate from the client base or people coming in was always, I want to see how I feel.
Yes.
So that was the biggest thing that I noticed. And then, of course, price comes into play, and people don't want to pay for something if they don't know if it's going to work. So I noticed, how can I set that expectations? First, I needed to try the product. And speaking, completely bold, I didn't believe in it myself. I really was not, it's like skeptical about how
Sure.
this would feel. So we really talk and preach about finding your drip. So I tried the power pack myself. I didn't feel too much from it. I guess my expectations were too high. I definitely linked it to caffeine or how the rush would feel. But my go-to drip now is the All-Star drip. I love the glutathione in it. I love, again, the way that it feels, the energy boost that they actually get from it. I feel it. So now I talk to members about that, or clients about that, I should say, and set that expectation. Deep dive into why they're here, why they walked in the door. That's part of fitness too, right?
Sure.
So why they came in, what the purpose of the drip is today. And then we really now start deep diving into what they're looking for. If they have anxiety, trouble sleeping, pain, then we talk about the Soothe drip. If they're looking for the energy boost, we talk about the power pack, but I set that expectation real quick. It's not going to be caffeine. You're not going to go run out of here, be Superman, flip a car, jump off a building. And that's what a lot of people sometimes think. They think that this is super serum, and that's what they're going to get.
And I think that's a good point, because it's about when you talk about a great salesperson, it's about being honest.
Correct.
So, I love when we do mystery shopping on a Friday sales call here at the DRIPbaR, where we mystery shop people all over the country, mostly competitors of ours, right? And it's just interesting how quick they are to talk about what they have to offer. Whereas, like, when you come from a fitness background, the most important thing is talking about why and what their goals are, right?
Yep.
So what is your goal? And most importantly, why? Whether it's they're getting ready for a wedding or they're hungover or whatever the case, or they're sick, whatever the case may be. And so that's the parallel and the analogy that I love with fitness is that you're really well versed in spending more time, right, on the client first. And you're not afraid to say, hey, this particular drip is not going to give you that instant feedback, but maybe something else will.
Correct. Yeah, really being in tune with the client, it goes a long way. And like you said, honesty. Don't oversell it. Don't promise anything that is not to be true. Because it's about finding the right protocol. We have plenty of programs here at the DRIPbaR, and making sure that they understand it's not going to be a one-time thing. If you're really looking for improvement, that's what the memberships are there for. We have options for you to do a once a month or a twice a month type of membership. So finding the right membership to fit somebody, even if somebody's not interested in a membership, finding the right package or program that's going to best suit their needs.
I'm assuming, because you're really good at selling memberships, that the people and the workflow are the two key things, right? So we talk a little bit about the people that you have here, which are phenomenal. What is that workflow like? If I came in today for my first trip, I meet the person at the front desk, right? What happens from that point on?
Yeah, so if we haven't confirmed what you're getting over the phone, which most of the time that's the way it goes. Like, no one really is too sure about what they're going to get when they first come in. So the front desk will, greet them, be nice and friendly when they walk in. We start going over to the intake forms to make sure we go over medical. But during that process, either myself or the front desk, if I'm unavailable, will start to really now ask a lot of questions towards that client when they come in. Basically be like, what's the purpose of the drip today? Are you feeling a certain way? What are you looking to improve upon, or what are you looking to really go? And then they'll, explain to us. So then from that point, now we take them into the back. They meet our nurse. They go through the process. They go through their PA call. So they do the telehealth call with our PA, as well as now they do a little bit more of a deep dive with the nurse.
Sure.
So any recommendations that we make, the nurse has already prepped a little bit, because I'll go back after having the initial consult and talk to them.
Now, pause right there, because a lot of people listening are going to go, I do that same thing. I do that same process.
Right.
Ryan is no different than me, but I haven't sold 200 plus memberships.
Right.
So continue.
So after the nurse comes in, has the conversation, we do vitals, we set the line, and then they mix the drip. While that person is dripping, there's still more processes that are happening, more conversations. Again, I sit down, have a little bit more before the conversation, get to know the person a little bit. Can be more about their life, can be more about their job, can be more about their kids, and really now start building upon different values that we can talk about during that sales process. Because again, it's about getting them the product that they're looking for, but it's also about really fitting it to that particular person.
No, absolutely. And I've seen you many times while I'm dripping here, coming over, talking to a customer that was just set up, right?
Yeah.
And so I know that happens for sure.
Yeah.
And I think, again, it goes to as much rapport building as you can do is, I think, the key, right?
Yes.
And the key is, listen, that happens a lot with the nurses.
Yes.
I'm not sure how much that happens with the front desk people.
Right.
But I know you make it a point to be back here a lot, right?
Yep, correct. So the nurse, you can't rely just on your nurse, right? The nurse is going to be, I always say, that's the loudest voice in the room.
Yeah.
Because the person coming in, that's who they're going to trust the most. So as long as your nurse is educated or speaks the same language as you do, and you're talking about the same talking points, it's a second voice. Now you're hearing it a second time, and then kind of takes a little bit of that guesswork out for the front desk. So as the person's already basically sold, they want to review the programs. Now it's the next step on my part to walk up to my front desk and be like, all right, Corey's here. He's really looking to improve upon his mood. He's had some low energy levels, so he's doing the power pack today. But these are the reasons why he's doing the power pack. He's got kids. He's running around with them. He's chasing them around all the time. He's managing or running a big corporation like the DRIPbaR. Not you. But then now it's about now that person or the front desk can now have that conversation as well. So it's three voices basically all talking about the same thing, which now when they come up, my biggest closing line always is, if you think you're going to do this again, which we always recommend 2 times or once a month, it just makes sense.
Oh, wait, hold on. Because I think the whole episode could just be narrowed down to that, right? Because, it's so funny. I would talk to trainers. Same thing with you, is like, we're really good at training people.
Yeah.
What we're not good at is like that last.
Yeah.
Because that's nothing to do with training. This is like me trying to sell you now. But people find it difficult to actually ask for a sale.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing, right? And by the way, there's nothing wrong with it.
No.
So say that one more time.
Sure. So if you're going to do this, think you're going to do this again, it just makes sense.
I love that. And a lot of people say,
yeah.
And listen, in sales, a lot of people say no. So how do you, so someone says no, and legitimately they want to still see how they feel or whatever. What's that part of the business like when someone walks out without a membership? Because not everyone is going to buy a membership. We happen to be focusing on that now.
Correct.
But what happens at that point?
Yeah, so we do our follow-up. We always follow up the next day. We want to make sure that how they're feeling. Then we do our next follow-up a week later. We want to do the next implementation, because during our conversation, we talk about the instantaneous feeling of the hydration. You're going to feel a little mental clarity. You're going to feel focused. But the big things we really want to dive onto is what you're going to feel later on. So that's why we have our touch points. We'll touch base the next day, and then we'll touch base a week later, and then we do it 2 weeks later.
Consistency.
Correct.
Yeah. Exactly. And those are actual phone calls.
Those are actual phone calls and text messages.
Love that. So last 2 things. One piece of advice for an owner out there, because you work for 4 owners, right? 4 owners own this location.
4 amazing owners.
4 amazing owners, and they're going to open up a lot more here on Long Island. Listen, what would you say to an owner that's putting together a staff? What's like the key thing in putting together a staff?
Well, you're in the people business, so you need to make sure you put together people-oriented staff.
So people with experience that are in that customer service realm, right?
100%.
And then piece of advice for just that membership flow, like how important that EFT drop is every month.
It's huge. So even on days that you're not even open,
you're dropping. I love it.
And that's a big thing.
So Ryan, thank you. I'll be obviously frequenting this location all the time. So I'm glad you were able to invite me in and do this. And the next interview we do with you will be at the station open. So thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Corey.